millions of academic papers are going to be published this year. Like, literally millions.
Yeah, a staggering amount.
Right. And, if you are trying to run a business, or maybe draft a new piece of local legislation, or even just figure out how to navigate a massive cultural shift in your community, you might assume the answers are somewhere in those papers.
You definitely hope so, right? I mean, that's supposed to be the point of research.
Exactly. But if you actually try to pull one of those studies off a shelf today and use it to solve an immediate on-the-ground crisis, how far would you actually get?
Honestly, probably nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. You'd hit a paywall or you'd drown in dense jargon. And ultimately, you'd realize the research feels completely disconnected from reality.
It is the classic ivory tower frustration. I mean, the public often looks at academic research as this highly theoretical exercise.
Right, like it's not meant for us.
Yeah, it feels like an exclusive club where scholars write for other scholars, and they measure their success by how many times they get cited by their peers, rather than, how many actual human problems they solve out in the world.
And that frustration, that exact feeling, is why we are taking this deep dive today. We're looking at this really brilliant piece of analysis from Wikipedia, written by Mutiyu Yanda.
It's a great piece.
It really is. This article introduces a 5-part series looking at the 19-year research impact of Professor Babatunde Raphael Ojebuyi. And the mission for our conversation today is to basically figure out how this specific scholar managed to shatter that ivory tower.
Right, because he actually did.
Yeah. We want to know how he took complex academic theory and forged it into actual usable tools for everyday people.
What's fascinating here is that the analyst, Mutiyu Yanda, isn't measuring Professor Ojebuyi's worth using those typical academic vanity metrics.
No peer review counting.
Exactly. We aren't just counting publications for the sake of tenure. The analysis focuses on how this one communication scholar managed to diagnose and solve problems across the 5 major structural pillars of any society.
Which are, what again?
Right, so that's people, process, product or service, technology, and finance. He looked at the entire mechanical structure of how a society operates, and he analyzed it entirely through the lens of human communication.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to really grasp the magnitude of what Professor Ojebuyi has done over 19 years, we need to understand the standard operating procedure he's rebelling against, right?
Absolutely. The contrast is what makes it so important.
Yeah. And the underlying premise of this Wikipedia article is that the public is just exhausted by research that observes a problem without offering any actual fix.
To understand how he breaks that mold, you really have to look at his foundation. Because he earned all of his academic degrees, every single one, from his undergrad straight through to his PhD from the Department of Communication and Language Arts at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. Oh, wow. So he stayed at the same institution the whole way through.
Yeah, which gives him this incredibly deep, localized grounding.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really does. And out of that deep grounding comes a very non-traditional approach to his discipline. In standard academia, communication is almost entirely treated as a descriptive field.
Meaning they just watch and write down what happens.
Basically, yeah. A researcher will go into a community, observe how people are sharing information, document the flaws in that media landscape, and then just publish a paper describing the situation.
So they just say, here's what's broken.
Right. But Professor Ojebuyi approaches communication more like an engineering discipline. For him, it is a rigorous problem-solving tool.
Oh, I see. So it's like traditional academic research is a complex cookbook written in a dead language.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, it sits on a pristine library shelf, the recipes are theoretically flawless, but it doesn't actually feed anyone in the neighborhood.
But Professor Ojebuyi is actually taking those raw ingredients, walking into the kitchen, and serving up meals that people can eat today. He is actively feeding the community with actual solutions.
That analogy perfectly captures the distinction. And the reason this shift from a descriptive mindset to a problem-solving mindset matters so much is that description only outlines the shape of your pain.
What do you mean by the shape of your pain?
Well, think about it. If a researcher tells a local government, hey, your community has a massive communication deficit regarding public health, they have successfully described the issue, right?
Yeah, they pointed out the problem.
But they haven't given you a ladder to climb out of the hole. Problem-solving research steps in and says, here is the exact structural framework you need to implement to change how information flows.
So the health outcomes actually improve.
Precisely. You have to bridge that gap between observing the public and actually equipping the public.
Right. And if creating actionable solutions is the goal, we should probably look at where he started testing this approach.
We definitely should.
Because according to the timeline in the article, he didn't start in some corporate boardroom or a high-level government think tank. He started in a middle school.
Yeah, let's go back to 2007. That marks his very first published article.
Wait, 2007, what was the study?
So this was an experiment conducted at the International School at the University of Ibadan. The focus was on using targeted reading approaches to destigmatize people living positively with health challenges.
And this was specifically about HIV and AIDS. Right.
Yes, specifically HIV/AIDS.
I mean, in 2007, that was a highly sensitive and just incredibly necessary conversation to be having, especially with younger students.
Absolutely.
But I'm kind of curious about the actual mechanics of this. We're talking about a communication scholar tackling a massive public health crisis. And stigma is basically a psychological and cultural issue. So how does communication actually solve that?
That's the core question, right? Because stigma, at its very root, is just a destructive narrative.
A narrative, like a story.
Exactly. It's a communication failure fueled by a lack of accurate information and an overabundance of fear. If a community ostracizes someone with a health condition, they are doing so based on the stories they've been told about that condition.
Oh, I see. So it's about changing the story.
Right. By introducing specific, structured reading materials to these students, Professor Ojebuyi was testing a mechanism. He was basically asking, if we systematically change the information these students consume, can we rewire the cultural narrative and eliminate the stigma?
Wow. So he was treating literature and reading not just as an educational requirement, but as like a scalpel to remove a societal bias.
That is exactly what he was doing.
So he is testing a behavioral intervention through communication.
And the data shows that this early experiment ignited what the analyst calls an aggressive research phase.
Right. From 2008 to 2013, he produced 9 major publications, right?
Yep, 9 publications. The focus during this window was heavily weighted toward media ethics, HIV/AIDS communication, and establishing foundational communication theory.
You know, there is a detail in the article about this specific window of time that I found really fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Which part?
Well, this period of intense, aggressive research output perfectly mirrored the trajectory of his PhD supervisor, Professor Babatunde Ojebuyi.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. His mentor was also making a massive, highly productive push for professorship between 2008 and 2013. Just paints this cool picture of 2 scholars locked in an intense, mutually reinforcing sprint.
It really highlights the power of proximity, When you're in an academic department where the leadership is relentlessly pushing the boundaries of what can be published and proven, that momentum is contagious.
Totally contagious.
That kind of parallel drive often forces a young scholar to refine their methodologies much faster than they would in isolation.
But, I mean, testing theories in a controlled environment or focusing on health narratives is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If communication is truly the fundamental bedrock of how a society operates, the theories have to hold up when the context completely changes.
Right, they have to be adaptable.
Right. Which brings us to a massive leap in his career. In 2016, he hits his highest citation year ever based on the number of publications. 108 citations.
That's a huge spike.
And the landmark study that drove that spike was titled Mobile Phone Use for Agribusiness by Farmers in Southwest Nigeria.
It is a radical shift in subject matter.
It is, and honestly, I have to challenge this trajectory a bit.
Go for it.
We just spent a decade looking at a guy untangling the psychological knots of HIV/AIDS stigma in schools, and suddenly he is analyzing agricultural crop yields and mobile phones in rural Nigeria.
Yeah, it seems pretty out of left field.
From the outside, that looks incredibly disjointed. Like, if I'm looking at his resume, I might assume he's just jumping onto whatever random academic trend is hot at the moment to secure funding or get published. What is the connective tissue here?
Well, it's entirely fair to question that jump. But when you look closely at the mechanics of both studies, the connective tissue actually becomes incredibly obvious.
Really? How so?
Whether he is looking at health stigma among teenagers or the financial efficiency of a rural farmer, the core issue he is diagnosing is always information distribution.
Okay, walk me through that. How does a mobile phone change the mechanics of a farm?
So think about the daily reality of a farmer in Southwest Nigeria prior to widespread mobile tech. Your entire livelihood depends on factors completely outside your control.
Like the weather.
Exactly. You need to know when the rains are coming. You need to know the current market price for your specific crop in a city 50 miles away. And you need to know which middlemen in the supply chain are going to offer you a fair deal.
Right, and without a phone, you don't know any of that.
If you don't have that information, you're operating in the dark. You get exploited by buyers or your crops die because you missed a weather shift.
You are totally isolated. The lack of information is literally costing you money.
Exactly. The mobile phone isn't just a cool gadget. It is the communication vehicle that breaks the isolation.
Oh, I see.
Professor Ojebuyi's 2016 study proved that communication isn't just public relations or media broadcasting. It is the invisible infrastructure of economic development.
Wow, invisible infrastructure. I like that.
When farmers can text a market to check prices before they harvest or receive localized weather alerts, their efficiency skyrockets. The subject matter shifted from health to agriculture, but the underlying thesis remained identical.
Which is, if you fix the communication breakdown, the society flourishes.
Precisely.
And realizing that underlying thesis makes the next phase of his career make a lot more sense. Because if 2016 was about understanding how a relatively simple piece of technology, like a basic mobile phone, could rewrite an entire economic sector, that perfectly sets the stage for how he tackles the absolute chaos of our modern technological era.
Oh, yeah. The scale of his work over the last 5 years explodes in complexity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Notes a massive surge in interdisciplinary work. 33 publications in just the last half-decade.
33 is a massive output.
It is, and the topics are wildly diverse. We're talking digital citizenship, the governance of artificial intelligence, fake news, and neurobiobanking ethics.
Yeah, that last one always catches people off guard.
I have to admit, when I read neurobiobanking, I had to do a double take. We just went from a farm in southwest Nigeria straight into a sci-fi laboratory. What business does a communications scholar have inside a biobanking facility?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually sounds strange until you realize what happens when cutting-edge science ignores human communication.
Okay, what is neurobiobanking exactly?
So neurobiobanking involves the collection, storage, and distribution of human brain and nervous system tissue for advanced medical research.
Whoa. Okay.
It is incredibly sensitive work that touches on deep ethical, cultural, and religious nerves for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, because you are asking the public to literally hand over human tissue.
Right. And if the scientific community cannot clearly and transparently communicate their privacy standards, their ethical boundaries, and the overarching public benefit of this research to the general population, what happens? Trust evaporates instantly.
Oh, I can see that. You get panic.
Yeah.
You get rumors, conspiracy theories, and people just assuming the science is exploitative.
And once that public backlash hits, the funding dries up, the legislation blocks the research, and the entire scientific endeavor collapses.
So the communication failure kills the science.
Exactly. The scientists might be the ones handling the tissue samples, but they desperately need a communication architect to build a framework of consent and trust with the public. Without that framework, the science simply cannot exist.
That makes total sense. The technical execution of the science doesn't matter at all if the information distribution around it is broken.
Right.
Which also completely explains why he is diving so heavily into AI and fake news governance right now.
Those are arguably the greatest information distribution crises of our time. I mean, how do you govern truth in a digital space that is actively designed to spread outrage?
You really can't treat that as just a coding issue.
No, it is not a software engineering problem. That is a massive societal communication problem. Professor Ojebuyi's work stays relevant because he isn't just studying the history of media. He is running directly toward the bleeding edge of where society is struggling to understand itself.
And the data reflects that urgency.
Yeah.
2023 was his peak productivity year.
12 publications in a single calendar year.
12. And diving deep into contemporary debates like youth resilience in the digital age, plummeting media trust, and global communication theory. He is looking at the digital wilderness we all live in right now, and he's actively trying to draw a map.
When the global population is overwhelmed by AI deepfakes, algorithmic bias, and just general institutional distrust, an academic shouldn't just be a passive commentator.
Right.
Professor Ojebuyi is acting as a frontline responder. He is trying to build cognitive resilience, particularly for younger generations who are inheriting a completely fractured digital ecosystem.
Okay, so we've traced his evolution from a classroom in 2007 all the way to the complexities of AI and biobanking in the 2020s. He has published over 80 papers.
A huge body of work.
Huge. But this brings us to the ultimate test of our deep dive. Because, it is very easy to praise a scholar for writing a lot of papers on important topics. But how do we actually quantify this impact?
Right. How do we measure it?
If the goal is to break out of the ivory tower, how do we turn this massive, daunting body of work into something that you, the listener, can actually use in your life or your business today?
That is the exact challenge the data analysts at Infoprations took on. They didn't just count up his citations and call it a day.
What did they do?
They utilized something called an impact discovery tool to critically tear apart 19 years of his publications. They were specifically scanning for utility.
Well, the raw numbers they found are definitely impressive. Over 500 citations within the academic community, and 32 of his articles are published in Scopus Index outlets.
And for anyone unfamiliar with the academic publishing world, getting indexed by Scopus is a huge deal. It means your work has survived a brutal, globally recognized standard of peer review.
It is basically a massive indicator of rigorous quality.
It's the gold standard for credibility. But you are right, a citation is really just another scholar nodding in agreement.
Yeah, it doesn't build a bridge or save a business.
Exactly. The real breakthrough from the Infoprations analysis was the discovery of 44 specific, actionable outputs hidden within his research.
44 of them.
They essentially distilled his entire career down to 44 tangible tools that directly target those 5 pillars we mentioned at the start. People, process, product technology, and finance.
So what does this all mean? I want to push you on this because actionable output still sounds a bit like academic jargon to me.
Fair enough.
The analysis breaks these 44 outputs down into 2 distinct categories.
Yeah.
They found 20 frameworks and 24 models.
Yes.
So if I am a business owner staring down a massive PR crisis, or maybe I'm a local policymaker trying to figure out how to regulate AI tools in my city's schools, what is the actual mechanical difference between handing my team one of his frameworks versus one of his models?
Think of it as the difference between diagnosis and forecasting.
Okay.
Let's look at the frameworks first. The 20 frameworks represent structured, step-by-step approaches designed to guide immediate action. Let's use your example of a business facing a PR crisis caused by fake news or a loss of consumer trust.
Which is a very real scenario for a lot of companies right now.
Oh, absolutely. If you pull one of his frameworks, it isn't going to give you a theoretical essay on why fake news is bad.
Right. Which wouldn't help me in a crisis anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to give you a structural protocol. It might outline the exact sequence of communication channels you need to utilize to intercept a rumor.
Oh, wow.
It will dictate how to address the people component, like who needs to speak and with what tone. It will address the process component, how quickly the information needs to be released to outpace the algorithm. A framework is essentially a fire extinguisher.
A fire extinguisher.
Yeah, it gives your stakeholders the immediate instructions needed to put out today's fire.
Okay, I understand that. A framework is for execution. It is about fixing the present moment. So what does a model do?
The models, and the data shows he produced 24 of these, are built for anticipation.
Anticipation.
Right. A model takes current data and projects it forward to show you a future trajectory. Let's take your other example, the local policymaker looking at AI in schools. You don't have a crisis today, but you know a massive technological shift is coming.
Right. You are trying to write the rules before the chaos starts.
Exactly. If you hand your committee one of his models, that tool will help you visualize what the information ecosystem is going to look like 5 years from now, based on how people currently interact with technology.
Oh, that's incredibly useful.
A model might project how AI will degrade student trust in historical texts if digital literacy isn't implemented by a certain grade. It allows a policymaker to build proactive regulations.
Okay, so if a framework is a fire extinguisher for today,
a model is the architectural blueprint for fireproofing the house for tomorrow.
that distinction is brilliant, and it completely recontextualizes the value of academic research. I mean, his work offers a dual approach. You get the practical, immediate guidance you need for snap decision-making today, coupled with the conceptual tools required to anticipate the needs of the next decade.
And that dual utility is incredibly rare. It is what makes his scholarship relevant whether you are a rural farmer trying to optimize your crop yield or a tech developer trying to navigate the ethics of neurobiobanking. He provides the structure.
We started this deep dive talking about the frustration of the ivory tower. We all know what it feels like to be drowning in information but starving for actual solutions.
We've all been there.
But looking closely at the 19-year career of Professor Ojebuyi proves that the solutions actually exist. Being a well-informed leader, or just a well-informed citizen, isn't just about passively absorbing raw data from the news or from academic journals.
Not at all.
It is about demanding more utility from the information we consume. It is about digging past the surface to find the frameworks that will solve our immediate crises and the models that will protect us in the future.
It is a profound shift in perspective. And looking at the sheer adaptability of his career over the last 2 decades leaves us with a really compelling thought to chew on.
Yeah.
This raises an important question. We just saw how a communication scholar managed to forecast the ethical governance of cutting-edge artificial intelligence and neurobiobanking simply by studying the foundational mechanics of human interaction.
Right.
If understanding how people talk to each other is the key to unlocking those massive technological hurdles, what other seemingly unrelated soft science fields should tech billionaires and global policymakers be urgently studying right now to survive the crises of the next 50 years?
That is a phenomenal question. It suggests that the answers to our hardest, most complex technical problems might actually be waiting for us in the communication department. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a look at the data you are consuming this week. Keep hunting for those actionable frameworks. And as always, keep asking the big questions.